Hello, welcome to another exciting episode of the AfCFTA podcast, where we've been talking everything about the AfCFTA, telling you about how far we have come with a continental vision of creating a single market. We began with a conversation on how the negotiation period started, the formation and everything of the AfCFTA. We've moved on to the meat of the agreement itself, talking to the men and women who are steering affairs at the AfCFTA Secretariat, putting together the protocols and the tools and all the instruments that is required by the continent to be able to move goods and services across borders on the continent of Africa. Now, today we are pleased to bring you another important aspect of the AfCFTA, the private sector unit that deals with the value chain of the AfCFTA agreement, and Director Themba is heading that directorate at the AfCFTA Secretariat. He's going to help us unpack what the private sector unit that is responsible for the value chain really is all about, and whether indeed, and a lot of us have been asking, where is the private sector in all of this? Where is the private sector in the AfCFTA? What are the value chain issues that we can unpack within the AfCFTA? Director Themba, it's a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much. It's been long coming.
It's been long, and we are pleased, as a matter of fact. I want you to help us unpack that particular directorate that you had, what it entails, and what the public, the continental public, needs to know.
Okay, thank you very much. And when we came in and got to be given a responsibility or mandate by the Secretary General, was to say, please work with partners to prioritize key value chains that we think are going to make a bigger contribution to our objective of increasing intra-Africa trade and production. With the support of some of those partners, mainly MasterCard Foundation, we worked with McKinsey & Company just to look at where the opportunities would be. And in the main, considering where we import the most as a continent, whilst having the capacity to produce the same goods. Not necessarily to only drive an import substitution strategy, but where we can be able to build competitive industries for global trade that obviously leverages on the AfCFTA to be able to build that capacity. And we did that and ended up prioritizing 4 key value chains. One on the automotive sector, considering the number of imports you see across the continent of second-hand vehicles, whilst we have investments in the continent, in South Africa, in Morocco, in Egypt, a bit in Algeria, which is also being capacitated, and the number of assembly plants that you will find here in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, that we then needed to leverage on and say, can we be able to therefore look at the AfCFTA, the impact it may be able to help, because what you require is economies of scale to then be able to drive these investments. With our disintegrated economies, we could not be able to do so. So you still see a lot of production in Morocco for mainly Europe. You see South Africa's production for exports in Europe, in Americas, and others, with a few vehicles that actually find themselves in the continent as a direct export. Mm-hmm. Probably some come as a redirect of exports after having been, or these cars after having been somewhere in Europe or Americas. And then you look at agriculture and agro-processing. The food importation bill remains very high, whilst we argue about available arable land in the continent to be able to help us produce and trade, and these are not necessarily new issues. They come a long way back, whether Abuja Treaty or some of the statements that would have been made way back in 1963. So we needed to then consider that and say, how do we leverage on the AfCFTA to be able to produce and trade and agricultural commodities. We have the issue around pharmaceuticals. Even before COVID-19, we had already surpassed $16 billion worth of import of generic drugs, mainly. And then you have pockets of investments in some of the countries that are actually doing work or investments in the pharmaceutical space and vaccines. Lastly, the issues around transport and logistics. The continent spends a lot. I think at the time that we did the study, we're looking at about $34 billion that we're spending a year just on transport and logistics, which in the main also undermines our capacity to support productive sectors. So those are the 4 areas wherein we worked with the private sector to be able to unpack what are the barriers to trade and production, and therefore what will be the interventions which we can be able to coordinate both with the private sector, AU agencies and DFIs to be able to lead or implement a program that seeks to address those challenges, leverage on the AfCFTA to be able to make investments and trade in the continent. So briefly, that's what informs the work of the unit, and obviously in partnership with other units that we coordinate this work with, whether is it customs and trade facilitation, the trade in goods, and others that are key to us being able to move a needle in this area of work.
Yeah, and if I get it clearer, that sounds like most of the businesses, particularly that have these connect to the value chains that you deal with, are mostly big corporations, aren't they?
In some areas, yes. I mean,
do you have small and medium enterprises?
In the pharmaceutical space, obviously, you mainly have like your global or multinationals that are making in investments in that space. In automotives, you also have what we call original equipment manufacturers in the form of your VWs and Toyotas. But when you look at some of the investments that have been made, you will see some of what could be considered medium companies that are operating in special economic zones to produce specific products for these OEMs and that employ a lot of people, and that is why when you look at even what we call an AfCFTA automotive strategy, puts a bigger emphasis on localization of production of components, because we think from a job creation perspective that's where the target should be. If you look at agriculture and agro-processing, we now have a program which we are implementing with the support of Mastercard Foundation that's just targeting SMMEs that are owned by women and young people. And we think we can be able to get some lessons out of that program which could be replicable across sectors.
But this is within the particular one with the MasterCard is within the agricultural sector.
Yes, and mainly looking at agro-processing side.
Okay.
And facilitation of cross-border exports by these SMMEs, as I said, that are owned by women and young people. Then it's a deliberate focus, because we think we should be able to see how the most vulnerable can be able to be supported, to be able to benefit out of the agreement. The bigger companies that we're talking about, most of them have got luxury. They have luxury to even call them the minister if there are issues at the border or whatever. But
the smaller ones are the ones with the problem.
They don't have such luxury.
The more reason I wanted to know whether your space also accommodates those small, micro, and medium enterprises. Let me first find out. A lot of people assume And that's the misconception out there, that the AfCFTA at the governmental level. It's only governments and countries and party states that you deal with and talk to and all of that. But we are fortunate to have you here engaging private sector. I want you to help us understand the role that the private sector, whether big or small, can play in driving the AfCFTA. Because we all know that it's the private sector that does business.
Yes.
It's not governments.
That's correct. Yeah. If you look at our AfCFTA private sector engagement strategy, we actually list the companies that we engage with per sector. So when we say this is the outcome of an engagement with the automotive companies and those that are playing a role, we actually listed those companies that were engaged, from the association, as in the African Association of Automotive Manufacturers, to the individual OEMs that were engaged, so that it's then clear that this is not an outcome of a process that took place in an air-conditioned environment, the AfCFTA
The people were involved.
but that this is the industry saying, if you want us to make investments in the continent, conclude the rules of origin.
Okay.
And the rules of origin should be able to enable industrialization. And that's why part of the negotiations that obviously took long, not because we wanted to delay them, but also because of the interest of
the industry players,
industrial players and state parties to it, just to make sure that whatever becomes the agreement can be able to benefit everyone who sees a role being played by their companies in the space. And some of the issues that ended up informing what is now an AfCFTA automotive strategy actually comes out of such engagements with the private sector, in saying we need the rules of origin concluded, we need access to finance, we need to be able to look at whether can we be able to invest in R&D in the continent, so that we can even be able to get to a point where we produce cars that are relevant for African conditions. So we have that outlined, and it came as a result of our engagement with the private sector. The same went for the agriculture and agro-processing space, where we engaged with a lot of. Fortunately, I mean, you do have quite a number of even UN agencies that have been working in the space. They have been doing some research, and they could be able to participate and inform what ultimately becomes interventions, and especially interventions that can be either coordinated by ourselves, because that was key for us. It's not just about putting an intervention that you cannot do anything about it, but where there's an opportunity to engage other partners. We have seen that actually happening, which is even happening right now with the process of the development of agri-trade action plan. Okay. That is also focused on identified commodities that we think give us the biggest opportunity to drive regional or continental integration in the agriculture, agro-processing space, mainly leveraging on the AfCFTA. As I said, those commodities are not new commodities, but we think we needed this kind of an instrument in the form of the AfCFTA to say, we have enough economies of scale. Everyone has bought into this. We have 50 state parties that are saying we have biggest challenges around the globe. Can we be able to utilize this as an alternative based on what we produce? Make sure that we can be able to process this for our trade and mainly food security in the continent. So we working on a new agri-trade action plan that we have just consulted with the ministries of agriculture across the continent, a meeting that took place in Addis in December last year. It's just for them to appreciate the proposals that are being made and to make their own proposals to refine the document which had already set in some of our institutional meetings. But we think there are specific areas that we should, all of us as Africans, pursue. At least in that space, it's not even so much about the rules of origin. It's about quite a number of NTBs that we need to address as countries, and the role therefore of state parties as opposed to the private sector is to ensure that those NTBs can be eliminated, or at least
and you mean
reduced.
The non-tariff barriers,
non-tariff
just for the audience who are not
that at least they can be reduced if we are to pursue this agenda, and that's now the new mandate that the Secretary General and with the leadership of the government of Rwanda that has given us to be able to work on, and we should be able to go to the next institutional meetings for the Council of Ministers to be able to consider that for approval. And we think it's a key action plan that should be able to help us move a needle in as far as leveraging on agricultural commodities to drive development in the continent.
Great.
Yeah.
And it does appear to me, I mean, listening to you, that there's a lot going on. There's a lot happening around the value chain space. And I know that the value chain is a big part of this strategy. But help us understand the regional value chain. When we talk about regional value chain, why is it so important in the industrialization drive of the continent of Africa? Break it down for a regular person on the street to know and relate to the fact that when we talk about regional value chain, or if the continent of Africa is seeking to industrialize, this is the role that the value chain, the regional value chains would play. And this is the connect that the AfCFTA has with it.
Yeah. So maybe if we go to the example of what's happening in the automotive space. So
car manufacturing, for
car
instance.
manufacturing. Yeah. So you will go to a country like South Africa. You go to, let's say, a VW plant or a Ford plant,
an assembly plant,
in the assembly plant, in actually manufacturing plant, because in South Africa they manufacture according to the definition of what is
manufacturing and what is
in a specific in a specific context. They will have where they do the final assembling, but that is supported by components that are coming from different parts of South Africa, different parts of SACU. They will have their leather seats coming out of Lesotho, a plant that employs more than 700 people just to do the seat covers. And the idea is that even the leather actually that supports that the seat covers, even though it may not necessarily come from the African continent, but we should be able to look at whether do we have supportive weather conditions to grow cattle that give us this type of leather that the OEMs actually require for them. But if that was possible, then you then look at where the leather comes from. Goes to, which may probably, let's say, be Botswana, then goes to Lesotho, then they do the seat covers, and then that goes to South Africa for final production. But along that value chain, you then see the impact from job creation. You look at impact of financing, where operations in Lesotho are obviously supported financially, and people are working there, and then they supply it to South Africa, and then that car obviously goes to Europe or US and the like. So we are looking there of it in that regional value chain. Where can we be able to find entrance points for Africans to be able to participate? So a person who then probably does that cattle farming could be considered a small-scale farmer that now has an opportunity to actually be able to participate in an automotive production without being known by a person who ultimately owns a vehicle. But the point is that in all this production, whether it's a person who actually does the nuts and bolts, people who or companies,
the leather seats,
companies that does
mirrors
brakes and
glasses.
mirrors and lights. I mean, we last year we visited a company in Port Elizabeth in South Africa, now known as Gqeberha, that does just the lights. And
lights of the cars.
The lights of the Hilux. It's a huge 400 million rands investment that employs about 2,000 people just to do the lights only.
Of Toyota Hilux.
Yeah. So and that's how we're looking at it, to say, even with the money that we got to fundraise via Afrexim Bank, how does it enable more of those investments?
Yeah.
Hence, it was critical for us to be able to agree on rules of origin that makes it possible to localize their production, especially in the components manufacturing space. And it's for that reason that we will then want to ensure that we increase local content for the benefits under the AfCFTA, because it enables us to localize those things. We may not necessarily be in a position to produce the engine, but anything else around it, we should be able to do that. Whether it's a person who does rubber in Liberia for tire manufacturing in Nigeria, and ultimately it goes to Kenya for the actual production or assembling of the vehicle, the facilities that we are creating and having support from the bank should be able to enable those people in Liberia to be able to get involved in the automotive value chain, giving them at least a market for them. And I think we're in the right direction.
Yeah.
We have just agreed on the rules of origin, and the issue is how do we then look at those investment opportunities, financially support them by our DFIs, and see job creation as an outcome of such policy decisions.
So you just mentioned that you've agreed on the rules of origin. This is for automobile sector?
Yes.
Okay. What about the other sectors? So those who are interested in pharmaceutical or agriculture, for instance, are we again sorted in that direction?
So there's let's say in the pharmaceutical space, there's ongoing work which is being led by Africa CDC as in the Center for Disease Control, as per the mandate given to them by the Assembly. Ours is to then ensure that the trade policy supports the initiatives. So we're looking at things such as African pooled procurement mechanism, because we need to be able to justify the investment that needs to be made through a market that makes it easy for people to make those type of decisions. We have countries and companies that have made investments here. We have got multinational companies that want to make investments, but they want to make sure that when they make an investment in Ghana and register a particular product, they don't want to do the same in Seychelles or do the same in Egypt.
There's a common
Africa.
standard or harmonized
standard.
standard.
So we need to be able to harmonize the rules. We have already agreed on rules in as far as what we should define a locally produced product, but we also need to make sure that through registrations and others we can be able to ensure cross-border movement of those goods, and that's ongoing work. And as I was saying, with the Agri-Trade Action Plan, it's the same thing that we are trying to do as well. There are countries that are able to produce rice, countries that are able to produce maize, cotton in the continent, but it becomes difficult to move these things around because of that standard or that technical barrier or whatever. And I think, given the challenges, as I said, geopolitical or geoeconomic challenge that we are facing, we should be able to take advantage of the instrument we have to be able to push more, and in that manner, we ensure self-sufficiency on those things, but at the same time ensuring that we can be able to support job creation in the continent across those sectors.
And very, very good and heartwarming hearing this from you. But I want us to also understand, with all these sectors that you talk about, what are and you talked about the instruments that should be able to ease some of these burden and the NTBs, the non-tariff barriers, and the challenges that we have around moving these products across. What would you say is the relief, the strongest relief and immediate, that is so glaring and tangible that everybody can see, that the AfCFTA brings to the table to eliminate some of these difficulties that we have seen around ensuring that some of these raw materials are able to move around the continent? And very good you talk about cotton. So assume that you have cotton moving from West Africa, let's say Burkina Faso or Niger, and having to go to southern or northern Africa to make clothing and textile for the textile industry. What has the AfCFTA come to do?
So I think the good thing is that we have a political will to make the AfCFTA work, and that can be demonstrated via the number of state parties to the agreement. If you look at let's say issued certificates of origin from some of the countries, it also indicates the interest to utilize the AfCFTA. And I think, and as you probably remember, when we they had the implementing the concept of the guided trade initiative, the momentum that was actually there and is continuing now via Biashara Africa. We do need to leverage on that wave and get everyone to appreciate that this is possible. We can be able to do it, and nobody's going to do it for ourselves. Africans must be able to pursue this. So we'll continue to engage, especially with the private sector, and where I would say there are probably, let's say, maybe difference of opinions, which may be based on whatever. Sometimes it's just lack of information or inability to properly and technically engage on some of the issues, that we should be able to look at that, convene state parties on some programs and have these discussions. We are currently implementing what we call an executive short course in partnership with the Toyota Vessels Institute of manufacturing studies in South Africa, just to focus on the automotive sector. We as you know, we delayed concluding rules of origin in autos, and we thought some of the issues were probably on the basis of discussing these matters on different understanding, and we felt, let's have this capacity building program just on automotive industrial policy, so that if there are issues that countries are concerned,
it can be beyond that.
It can be beyond at that level. It's not done by the Secretariat. It's actually industry people, it's academics that are then explaining these things, so that when we say there's an opportunity to participate in a regional manner or in a hub and spoke model, or as they call it, production networks, that you probably do not necessarily need to own a full manufacturing plant of Toyota or VW, but that you can be able to benefit because of whatever proximity that you may have in that region. So you have here in West Africa, you have investments in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, of assembly plants, and probably soon to be full manufacturing plants. So countries that surround these countries do not necessarily need to have their own manufacturing plants, but they can be able to supply inputs or components into that production. And we thought it was important that we have that discussion because the AfCFTA agreement provides for accumulation. And as I was making an example about what's happening in Lesotho, yes, maybe Lesotho will one day want to have its own full manufacturing plant, but it benefits from supplying the seat covers for South African operations. In Botswana, they do the wire harnesses and they benefit on the basis of the production in South Africa. You go to countries such as Tunisia, they may not have a full manufacturing plant for cars, but they do wire harnesses. They do quite a number of components, even though maybe right now they may necessarily be for exports into Europe, but those exports could be, or some of them could be redirected to the continent. They just needed this instrument to be able to justify such. And I think we're at a level there of where we can be able to use some examples of what is working and why it is important for everyone to participate. The colleagues that participated in Guided Trade Initiative in exporting tea from Kenya or coffee from Rwanda, they have put out examples out there of what is possible, and I think anybody can be able to take advantage. They just need to engage governments and ensure that the systems enable them to be able to do so, and the Secretariat should therefore be able to support that.
Good. Are there specific individual instruments that the Secretariat has in place that allows countries to address beyond the coordination and the platforms, including the Guided Trade Initiative that was initiated in October 2023, and then the Biashara Africa that's ongoing? Are there certain instruments that you want the private sector to be aware of that's available? The Secretariat has been able to put together and is available.
So let's say from funding instruments.
Good.
So you will still, as I was making an example about the 1 billion facility that
from AfCFTA
Bank to support components manufacturing. We are through Africa CDC engaging with some of the, let's say, will be donors that continue to procure a lot of pharmaceutical products and vaccines for distribution across the continent in the form of your UNICEF and Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization that is putting some funding to be able to support local manufacturing of those, because I'm not sure if you remember, but there was a decision by the Assembly that 30% of what we procure in the space should be from local manufacturers. And I think we are responding to that call. And what I said is the African pooled procurement mechanism is meant, one, to support that, but also ensuring that the continent can be able to produce 60% of what it consumes by 2040. And therefore, we're then looking at these partners, and including DFIs, local DFIs in the form of AfReximbank, AFDB, and others, to be able to support such initiative. In the agriculture and agro-processing space, we also looking at that internally. We're actually discussing the possibility of looking at an impact investment fund to be able to help integrate mainly SMMEs in the activities that we are actually pursuing, because wherever we go, and especially now with this fisheries program that I was talking about, the main issue that governments are battling with is access to finance, and therefore we're engaging with different partners to see how we can be able to close that gap. Because banks, whether commercial or development, are not gonna.
It's not for free.
They're not going to tweak their requirements just to respond to the challenge that way. But at least we should be able to set up some instruments that can be able to effectively help us respond to their cry. We do have some of the MOUs with continental banks in the form of EcoBank, Equity Bank, and others that have committed to supporting the agro-processing space. But we need to address that matter together with everyone who has an interest. So from an instrument point of view,
that financial instrument is
financial.
Is
I think
very critical.
It's there. I mean, the Secretary General just recently met with the Group CEO of ABSA, who also have an interest in supporting these areas. So it's not about the availability of money; it's access to that money, and that's what the Secretariat with the partners and we should therefore be able to pursue, and the rest of other instruments. Whether is it countries committing
harmonization of standards and all of that.
Those things we're discussing the fish certificate with the Standards Organization and Trademark Africa to be able to ensure that we should at least be able to guarantee some safety of those who consume these products through a fish certificate, because it's critical. They say out of all things you can eat, if you eat fish that is either rotten or whatever, you're most likely to die than eating rotten beef.
Because there's a lot of hope in consuming fish, but also, sorry, not rudely badging on. Also, it's important that we have the wholesomeness of the fish that's consumed on the continent, and that the certification is important.
Yes, that's correct. But through some of the engagements, I mean, we went to Zanzibar at some point where they do a lot of anchovies. They dry them in the open space, and we're like, so what is the plan? And fortunately, government is looking into modernizing that operation and ensure that safety standards are adhered to, which is a good thing, because you now then say, okay, by the way, there are countries that may be interested in this, and when they say, can you be able to give us good quality, you can then be able to say yes, here, and this is how we produce and process these things, and they can be able to meet your standards, and therefore please open up your market for our exports, and that's what we actually want to see, not only in the fisheries space, but across other subsectors in the agriculture space as well. Yeah.
Are you able to break down the sectors that have the strongest potential to benefit in terms of the value chain, in terms of businesses harnessing the potential of the AfCFTA? Would you look at automobile? We talked about auto, and you talked extensively about auto. You've talked about pharmaceuticals, agriculture, you talk about fisheries sector. Which of the sectors do you consider, per what you've observed, or maybe I'm pushing you too hard to the corner, that has the strongest potential? I think leading the charts now. So maybe others can follow later.
So from a manufacturing industrialization point of view, automotive sector give us that
the strongest potential. I see.
And as I was saying, when you look at the numbers of not just in a manufacturing plant or in the assembly plant. But the work and the jobs that comes through the components manufacturing, and I think that is something to watch out. We are working with some of the OEMs that would have always asked the Secretary General, when are you concluding the rules of origin so that we can be able to make investment decisions, and they are looking into doing so. One of those OEMs, if I can mention, that the Secretary met up with its chair and some of the executives in the Middle East and Africa office is Handy, that has interest in making such investments and taking advantage of the AfCFTA in both North and Southern Africa, and I think it's an indication of appreciation of the work and opportunities that come as a result of the AfCFTA. We are looking at that, but if you were talking about biggest opportunities, obviously it will be in the agro-processing space.
I see.
And that's why we are putting more effort in finalizing this agri-trade action plan, which we are working on together with AGRA and the contribution of many other organizations, including FAO, as I said, Afrexim Bank and the FDB, state parties that have contributed to this, because it's probably what we have. We're talking issues around cocoa production in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. We're talking about maize production. We're talking about horticulture, livestock. Not necessarily contributed that much to our contribution, to our integration, because of many reasons. Disintegration of our economies, sometimes on the basis of the colonial system of trade, which we are trying to dismantle through the AfCFTA. And that is why we say it is important for everyone to be able to focus on the implementation, because we have now provided enough economies of scale to justify these investments in the continent. And as I said, if we don't do it, nobody's gonna do it.
We have to take it up ourselves.
So it's not. We need to then move beyond counting the 50 state parties, but it's about the commitment to the implementation, and key to that is what is now part of the decision of the 39th summit of the African heads of state around the need to negotiate a protocol on industrial policy and development that should be able to also help us ensure collaboration, cooperation to support production in the continent. It's one thing to have an instrument that supports trade, but we also need to consider how we genuinely collaborate around the production part, and I think it should be a game changer, and needs to be able to move beyond just the rhetoric. We should be able to commit to its negotiation and especially the implementation. So these opportunities are there, and obviously will be facilitated by quite a number of other initiatives, including what we call trading companies, because we also don't want to turn small-scale farmers into traders. You just want to make sure there's enough market out there that they can be able to supply, so that they can be able to focus on the production. And I think the Secretariat, together with other partners, should be able to make that a reality across the continent.
And it's great you emphasize the shift in paradigm now from the negotiation to implementation. The group that we often hear that seem to be behind when it comes to information, the entrepreneurs, the small and medium micro enterprises. A lot of people are worried about the fact that a lot more information is not to go into them. Not a lot of them are aware of the many successes and the many progress that you have made in these sectors. How are we getting the information across to SMMEs down there who are also eager and anxious to take advantage of the AfCFTA? Are there mechanisms that, for instance, your outfit and programs that you are instituting to get closer to entrepreneurs?
So we do, and I'll probably have to continue making the example about this fisheries program. Last month we had a national stakeholder engagement forum in Lagos.
Good.
Wherein we brought mainly most organizations that are playing in that space to address the challenges and map out what are the potential interventions which come from what we'll call a situational analysis. We did that in Nigeria. We just came back from Cabo Verde. We did the same with the Minister of Sea, just to look at how do we support the initiatives that are already there, because these are not new things, but we're just saying we now have the AfCFTA that should be able to make sure that let's say for island states, yes, there's a market that may be in Europe or somewhere, but we think there's also a market that we can be able to consider, so that those who produce can be able to produce more, so that when we talk to even some of our colleagues and partners and say there's an opportunity to actually export fish from Cabo Verde to West Africa via Dakar, via Abidjan, and get into Abidjan, Lagos trade corridor, and let's sort out the issues that, let's say, increases the cost and therefore undermine their ability to be able to export the goods into the rest of the continent. And that's the discussion that we are therefore having right now, and it's a practical example of how we get to engage with those that are involved in the production, in the processing and trade, and they then indicate some of the challenges that they are actually facing. So that's one part. There's Biashara Africa that's coming, which is also one of the platforms that we will continue to utilize. Some of the issues we are dealing with right now are issues that we would have discussed in Cape Town during Biashara Africa in April 2023, just to say where companies were saying, look at this procurement issue in the pharmaceutical space. It cannot happen that we make investments in the continent, even in some of specific countries, but then when it's time for procurement, we are not given opportunities to be able to supply. So we need to be responsive to those things. Otherwise, we'll remain irrelevant to the private sector. And I think we have taken this role because we understand that, sometimes I use this football analogy that when the team is winning, it's the players. If it's losing, it's the coach. And therefore, the Secretariat is now going an extra mile to ensure that those that need this information, they are able to get it, and obviously working together with state parties that ultimately host some of these companies. These entrepreneurs are their citizens, and I think we should be able to ensure that that information filters down to those that need it the most, and that's the only way we can be able to get this to work.
Yeah, and some of the interventions that you talked about, the financial instruments that interventions that you offer to these conglomerates, are there something like that available for small and medium enterprises in the fisheries sector, in the textile sector, for instance?
Yes, in the main, that funding needs to go to SMEs. Bigger companies can use their balance sheets.
They may not even need it.
Yeah. Okay. So the funding needs to go to SMEs, but obviously they rely on those bigger companies to be able to get contracts. It's much easier when you have a contract and you go to a financial institution and say you need support, because at least they can guarantee themselves that you will be able to pay the loan. So So we are working with everyone. We're not limiting the scope. We're just saying the need is more on the bottom side of the pyramid, and therefore we should be able to focus there. But we are not saying to the exclusion of others, because that's where some of those contracts will be coming from. We have, let's say, in the retail space in the continent, we've got some of the bigger companies, whether it's ShopRite, is your Games, is your Choppies, and whatever, that get some of their supplies from some of the smaller companies, that if given an opportunity to be able to supply these goods, then it becomes easy for them to go to a financial services provider and say, I have this small production plant, but this big retailer needs me to be able to supply them with this and that, and therefore I need support. It becomes easier, which may probably be different from, let's say, in the technology space, where somebody says, here's my innovation. You then need to believe in that innovation without it having a particular contract somewhere. But we still need to be able to see how we support those as well, because technology will help us to leapfrog and drive integration in the continent much quicker.
Yeah. Then the small and medium enterprises are mostly dominated by young people and women. I don't know if you are intentional or quite deliberate about women and young people in your programs. Are you?
We are. They are the most vulnerable. They are the most, especially women, whether young or old, who have not been given opportunities across the continent for many years. And I think if we are to do justice as we implement the agreement, then the focus has to be to them, whether from production to cross-border trade. We need to be deliberate about it, and regardless of their preferred focus, that we have an immediate task to ensure that we can be able to integrate SMMEs that are owned by women and young people into the mainstream economy of the continent.
Good. You've been almost everywhere on the continent, always engaging. So you've got a lot of stories to share. Can you share some practical success stories that have emerged out of the many programs that you roll out there that we can identify easily?
So some of the engagements we have had, let's say, in the Republic of Zimbabwe, His Excellency President Mnangagwa had a discussion with the Secretary General around the need to deal with storage systems, food storage systems, because they continue to lose a lot of food because of lack of proper storage facilities. And we have been engaging with them, gotten some of the partners that are playing in the infrastructure space in the form of silos to engage with the Republic and look at what is it that could actually be done. And we are glad to see progress in as far as some of the partnerships that have entered into with some of governments to ensure that they could be able to address that, because we do feel that Zimbabwe has a potential to be able to produce for its own food security, but also for exports under the AfCFTA as an export of excess capacity, and that work is ongoing. Right now, we're even still having discussions with AfreximBank to ensure that it could also be able to support them for the same purpose in the ITF that happened in Cairo. They had signed an MOU with Egypt and Malawi to ensure that they could be able to export some of the grains, and it augurs well in terms of what we're trying to to do, just to at least guarantee those who produce that if they continue to produce, their food will not be lost because they are probably storing maize under conditions that if that maize continue to be there for a month or two, it would not be in a good position. That we think now we can be able to create systems that enable them to quickly supply to proper storage facilities for that food to be safe for both local consumption and exports. Is critical to the initiatives that we are putting in place. The others, let's say in other areas of priority, we are obviously seeing the interest, as I was saying. You have a company such as Hyundai that wants to take advantage of the agreed rules of origin to be able to make investments. We are seeing investments or announced investments by companies such as your Cherry Group that wants to make an investment in South Africa, but also focusing in the continent to be able to produce and supply under the AfCFTA. And so it's which is probably why even this issue of the protocol on industrial policy and development is important, because we want everyone to be able to commit to this cooperation or this collaboration across the continent, so that we can be able to take advantage of the AfCFTA. As I said, in the agricultural space, I think it's up to us as state parties to the AfCFTA and just Africans in general to say this is the instrument. Can we use it to our own benefit, so that when there are conflicts outside the continent, we are still able to feed our people.
To be independent.
Yes, it's very critical. It's very important. So let's work together.
That's great, and that's a lot. That's a lot under sleeves. Now, as we end, I would want you to look in the face of the African entrepreneur, whether woman or young person on the continent of Africa, and let us know some core practical things that you want them to begin to take. And be able to take advantage of the many programs that the Secretariat is putting across.
We are now in a position where we are able to say we have scanned around the continent, and these are the potential investments, let's say in the automotive space, that needs to be pursued by those that seek to or would wish to make such type of investments, leveraging on this financial instruments that we said we have put together with the bank, so that copper does not have to leave Zambia and go to Europe and come back in a particular standard that's required to do wiring harnesses. That we can now be able to say, can we pursue an investment in Southern Africa to be able to ensure that copper doesn't go outside for the purposes of wiring harnesses standards, that the issues around the battery value chain in countries such as Zambia, DRC, and lithium producers, Ghana, Zimbabwe, that we can now be able to practically look at whether is it a precursor that could be invested in, so that we don't just export raw materials, but that we now have an opportunity to be able to utilize the voice we have under the AfCFTA, prioritize continental development, to be able to make a difference in our continent. We're going to have to, obviously, as you're saying, continue to work with entrepreneurs, leverage on the agricultural sector and agro-processing in the continent, support them. As I said, economies of scale are important in production, and the AfCFTA instrument is there to ensure that those economies of scale are actually there, and it's for us to then be able to work together to make them realize their dreams in our lifetime. Yeah.
Great. You've talked about fish a lot in this conversation.
Yeah.
And I know you love fish. Which one do you love that you want to see move from South Africa to Ghana so that you can regularly consume? I just want to test you. What do you enjoy, though?
I mean, obviously, being in Ghana, probably once in 3 days, one engages with tilapia.
I knew you were going there.
Yeah. So and
once in 3 days, you engage with tilapia,
which is something I'm used to, by the way.
Yeah.
I grew up in the village.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So in South Africa, so sometimes.
Going for fishing and eating the fresh fish.
Yeah. So you
It's
go
very usual.
probably 10 a.m. You fish for lunch there, and then around 2 p.m. you now fish for home.
I see.
For cooking. So and it becomes some kind of a sport.
I see.
So it's not something that one is just getting exposed to
Yeah.
at a later stage, and in any way it's safe to. To
Maybe
eat.
the background is also helpful. The fact that you had that experience and now having to, at the continental level, having to facilitate the growth of this sector, across the continent. So
and the reason why it's as we're saying that we're being deliberate on the support for SMMEs that are owned by women and young people is because we see a lot of women that are involved in fish in cross-border trade.
Most of the coastal areas across the continent.
Obviously, the fishing itself is by men, but outside
those who trade in them,
those who do the processing, those who
on the land.
Yeah, it's mainly women, and I think they need to be given an opportunity to not just earn for a living. But also build businesses that can be able to help us employ more people around that value chain.
And since you converted fishing into sports at some point in your young life, have you been doing sports? I know I've seen you play soccer. So I've seen you play soccer, and I don't know if you enjoy playing soccer at this level. If you ever did play at a competitive level in your youthful days?
No, not really. At some point, I had injury, and so even right now, sometimes if I'm in a good mood, I will take a walk. I can't jog because my knee gives me problems. So I stopped at the university. I ended up playing chess. I'm most likely,
intellectually stimulating sports.
At this stage, if there was to be soccer and chess, I'm most likely to probably
go for
chess.
But the last time I saw you playing soccer, you were in a very beautiful jersey and a beautiful boot, which I believe that as part of the things that you do, we want to see some of these jerseys that are used in big soccer teams and all of that produced on the continent.
That's correct.
And I'm sure that the value chain can build on some of these areas, the soccer boots, the jerseys and whatever. That's within sports, the sports sector, right?
That's correct. And I'm glad you are mentioning that because I forgot to mention that on the margins of the Biashara Africa, through the Advisory Council of the Secretary General on Trade and Industrial Development, we'll be launching the action plan on cotton, textiles, which is focused on working with the industry, especially the continental industry, to ensure that we can be able to drive this value chain, and it will not just be the cotton producers, or it would include the retailers themselves, who are making a commitment to say, if we can be able to meet our standards, our requirements, our market demands, then we can be able to continue to procure in the continent. In the spirit of made in Africa, we should be able to therefore take advantage of this. And it, as I said earlier, it demonstrates the willingness of the private sector to be able to work with governments and the Secretariat to make meaningful contribution to supporting production in the continent. And I think we are in a good space to then be able to utilize that as one of the key value chains beyond fish that I was making an example with, where we see practical implementation, not just things happening just because markets have decided that we would continue to operate like we have always done, or we are taking advantage, but that there is a concerted effort that could be financially supported to be able to do so. We're having the same discussions with the bank, for example, to see to it that they could therefore be able to facilitate some support for those that wants to get involved in the implementation of the value chain.
Great. And we appreciate what you're doing. As a matter of fact, I want to see you the next time on the pitch wearing
made in Africa. Made under AfCFTA.
Made under AfCFTA jerseys and soccer boots and all of that. And it will look good on you because the one I saw you in number 9, you fit in the sports that you are at the moment, Director, doing great on behalf of the continent under the leadership of the Secretary General at the AfCFTA Secretariat, on behalf of the party states, and together with your colleagues at the AfCFTA. We continue to pray for you to have good strength and to be able to do a lot more for this continent. We appreciate the work that you're doing, Director. We'll drag you here again to come tell us a lot more in the future as we move on. And we hear that you are implementing now. You are no longer negotiating. That's the Secretariat, right?
Yes,
so everything is on the ground. Implementation stage.
Yeah, it's important. We have always maintained that people don't eat policies or strategies. They want projects, and that's the only way they can be able to earn a living and support themselves and their families. The rubber should hit the road, and I think there is no other opportunity to do so than now. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Director Themba. Director Themba, in charge of the private sector unit dealing with the value chain at the AfCFTA Secretariat, telling us a lot about the happenings around that sector, ensuring that private sector is able to move businesses across in line with the value chains that we see. So automobile, he talks about textile industry, he talks about pharmaceutical, agriculture. If you find yourself within any of these spaces, it's about time. Engage with the AfCFTA Secretariat. Send any questions through. I will endeavor to share them with Director Themba and the team at the AfCFTA Secretariat. Thanks for watching.